Everyone. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, and esteemed colleagues. First of all, on behalf of co-chairs of Surveillance and Response Working Group, or SRWG, for the Asian Pacific Malaria Elimination Network, or APMEN, I would like to extend my welcome all of you to participate in the APMEN Surveillance and Response Working Group TechTalk webinar on climate, malaria prediction, and implication for elimination today. The SRWG is one of three working groups in the Asian Pacific Malaria Elimination Network, and we are a peer-led technical working group for APMEN country partners or national malaria control programs and partner institutions. The working group seeks to disseminate and coordinate technical knowledge and support for surveillance and response activities through webinars such as this Tech Talk, trainings, direct technical support initiative, special interest groups, and our annual meetings. For example, next training course will be arranged in the late November this year. Today, we gather to delve into the intricate relationship between climate and the ongoing battle against malaria, exploring the challenges and opportunities climate change may present for our shared goal of malaria elimination. Climate change is not just a looming threat, but a reality that has a far-reaching consequence. In the realm of public health, its impact on disease like malaria is particularly profound. The various effects of climate, from temperature to precipitation to extreme weather events, exert direct or indirect influence on malaria transmission. Understanding these complex interactions is crucial for devising effective strategies for control and eventual elimination. So our esteemed speaker today will bring a wealth of knowledge and expertise to the table, each contributing unique perspectives to our understanding of these critical issues. Firstly, we will have Dr. Sharojana Bhattari, an independent researcher whose groundbreaking work involves predicting malaria transmission suitability based on climate projections for Nepal. Dr. Bhattari, who received her PhD from the University of Florida, will shed light on the specific challenges and opportunities presented by Nepal's climate and how predictive models can be instrumental in shaping and targeting malaria control measures. Secondly, we will hear from Professor Michelle Wimbury, a distinguished professor at the Department of Geography and Environmental Sustainability, University of Oklahoma. Professor Wimbury will introduce us the APMEN system, a cutting-edge software tool designed for the malaria epidemic forecasting in Ethiopia. His insights will showcase the interaction of disease and environmental monitoring, offering a holistic approach to epidemic progress. Thirdly, we will also honored to have Dr. Kashoka Shoka, the inaugural director of the Institute for Health Modeling and Climate Solutions. Dr. Shaka's presentation, entitled as Advanced Fusion Architecture of AI-based Early Warning System, will discuss the combination of multiple sources of complex and dynamic data and application of advanced modeling techniques, machine learning, and artificial intelligence to revolutionize early warning system for malaria and pave the way for more precise risk strata predictions. Lastly, we will welcome Professor Jimin Liu, Associate Vice President on Research Development, Dean of Faculty of Science of Hong Kong Baptist University, will give an introduction of a software system developed by their research team, aiming at predicting future transmission risk of infectious disease and optimize strategize resource allocation. This system will be used in malaria surveillance and elimination in the China-Myanmar board as a case study to demonstrate the functions and effectiveness of the developed software. And he will give us a lecture on the training course run by the APMEN in the late November as well. Dear distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, as you know, the APMEN is a forum that gathers all the leading researchers and implementers working toward the malaria elimination in our region. As we engaged with these experts and their presentation today, let us not only absorb the knowledge they shared, but also completely the actionable insights that can inform our collective efforts in malaria control and elimination. In conclusion, I extended my sincere gratitude to our distinguished speakers for their invaluable contribution and to all of you, our esteemed participants, for joining us in this crucial conversation. And I also very much appreciated by hard work from our Secretary of APMEN SRWG, who made this tech talk possible. Special thanks to my co-chair, Professor Richard Mulder, co-chair of the APMEN Surveillance and Response Working Group, and head of the Epidemiology Department, Mahedo Oxford Tropical Medicine Research Unit, who will introduce the topic and facilitate this session. Lastly, but not least, let us together to explore the intersections of climate and malaria prediction, discerning pathway towards a future where malaria is not just controlled, but eradicated. Thank you so much. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Zhou, for your opening remarks. And hello to everybody, welcome. I'm just going to cover some meeting mechanics on the next slide. The audio and video of attendees will be disabled, but we encourage comments in the chat box and questions in the Q&A box. So we've had opening remarks, then we'll have presentations, and we'll take Q&A for our first speaker immediately after that first talk. For the other talks, we'll do Q&A at the end. So you can type your questions in the Q&A box, and ideally, if you can name the speaker or speakers that you wish to address the question to, and then participants can upvote a question. So if you like the question and you want it to be addressed, then you can click the thumbs up and it will get votes and it will come up the list. At the end, we'll have a quick poll just about the event. And that's it. So I'm going to introduce the topic just quickly before we go on to our speakers. So this Tech Talk webinar is about climate and malaria, which is a very broad-ranging topic, and it's very topical at the moment, generating intense interest among academics, policymakers, and also in funding circles. So it ranges from looking at past trends and the impact of climate on changes in incidence and disease distribution over time, to disease prediction, both in the short term, for example, predicting outbreaks, to longer term prediction, including future impacts of climate change on disease patterns. So the impacts of climate are not just the direct effects on the mosquito vector, but also changes in human behavior, including movement patterns. So it's multifactorial. And a range of different climate measures are being used, from climate stations in countries to satellite remote sensing data. There's a growing set of methods and models being developed, ranging from traditional statistics to mechanistic modeling, through to AI and machine learning. And today we'll hear about some real-world examples using cutting-edge science to address this complex topic. So now we'll move over to our speakers. So our first speaker, Dr. Xiao-Nong, who's an independent researcher in Nepal. Over to you, Dr. Xiao-Nong.
Thank you, Dr. Maud, for the introduction. I will quickly share my screen. Can you see my screen? All right.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me, Moru and APMEN. It's wonderful to be here. I am Srizana Bhattrai. I'm from Nepal, but currently I'm based in Florida, United States, and it's midnight here right now. So please bear with me if I feel sleepy. So today I'm going to talk about my research from my PhD dissertation. And the title is Predicting Malaria Transmission Suitability in Nepal Under Climate Change. This research was recently published in Malaria Journal. So before going to the research, I would like to talk briefly about the malaria scenario in Nepal. Malaria cases have declined in Nepal significantly, and Nepal is preparing for malaria elimination by 2026. I would also like to talk briefly about the context of malaria transmission in Nepal. Nepal is a very small mountainous country. Its length varies. Its length is about 800 kilometers and breadth varies from 90 to 200 kilometers. However, the elevation of the country ranges from 60 meters to about 8,848 meters above the sea level. And thus the climate also varies from tropical savanna in the south to polar in the north. And based on this altitudinal and meteorological variation, there are three major ecological divisions in Nepal: the Tarai, the hill, and the mountains. And this ecological division has relevance with malaria transmission because historically malaria transmission was confined to Tarai, and the transmission would decrease as we move towards the north, with mountains being unsuitable for transmission. We conducted this study to predict malaria transmission suitability with climate change in Nepal using temperature-dependent mechanistic models. We used thermal suitability calculated from a study done by Villena et al. 2022, where they calculated the thermal suitability for malaria transmission in Asia and Africa. And we used the thermal suitability calculated for Asia and projected that into the landscape of Nepal in order to access the malaria transmission suitability for a combination of two vectors and parasites, Anopheles stephensi and Plasmodium falciparum. We called it ASPF, and Anopheles stephensi and Plasmodium vivax. We called it ASPV. For this, we obtained the climate data of two rasterized temperature data layers. So the first data set represent the global baseline climate data from the World CLIM version 1.4. These data set represent the mean climate for a period of about 30 years from 1960 to 1990. For the future projections, we used the ensemble mean of 4 general circulation models under the 2 greenhouse gas emission scenarios, RCP 4.5 and RCP 8.5, and for the years 2030 and 2050. And for mapping malaria transmission suitability, the gridded temperature data at the baseline and future climate scenarios month-wise were constrained to the temperature range of transmission, which generated pixel-wise monthly binary suitability. And they were summed to represent the number of month of the year for which that pixel was suitable for malaria transmission. And then we defined malaria transmission suitability as per the number of month of the year that pixel is suitable. So if the pixel was suitable for 10 to 12 months of the year, it was called endemic. If it was suitable for 7 to 9 months of the year, it was called seasonal. If it was suitable for 4 to 6 months, it was called moderate. For 1 to 3 months, it was called marginal. And if it was 0, it was called unsuitable. Then we compared the suitability at the baseline climate and the predicted climate to see if the suitability changes from one category to another category. And finally, we compared the future suitability with the government designated malaria risk areas in order to see how they compare with the places that are currently being implemented with the vector control interventions. So we have compared that with two categories, Department of Health Services Designated Risk Districts, DRDs, and Department of Health Services Designated Risk Wards, or DRWs. So the results, this is the map with the baseline malaria transmission suitability and predicted malaria transmission suitability. So A is the baseline, and the remaining are the predicted. And B and C are for 2030, D and E are for 2050, and B and D is under RCP 4.5, C and E under RCP 8.5. So if we look at the baseline map in the south, the suitability is endemic, the dark blue pixels, and as we move towards the north, the suitability decreases with the mountains being unsuitable, the yellow color. If we compare this map with the remaining of the maps, we can see that the endemic suitability expands towards the north, and also other suitability will expand and move towards the north, whereas the unsuitable areas will contract. So what will be the major shifts in suitability? So the major shifts in suitability will be the emerging of suitability, which means the places which were not suitable for transmission in the past will become suitable for transmission. And another will be increasing length of season, which means the places they were suitable for transmission in the past, but in the future, the season will get longer. So here are 4 maps. If you see this first set of colors, the yellow, green, and blue, they represent baseline malaria transmission suitability. You can see all of them in all of the 4 maps. The second set of colors, emerging suitability. So unsuitable areas will convert into marginal, moderate, and seasonal. You can find them in the first 2 maps, A and B. And so unsuitable areas in the mountainous area will change into suitable. And the third set of colors, increase in length of season, you can see them in map C and D. So in around the hilly areas in Nepal, the season of malaria transmission will get longer. And these 2 slides that I just showed you, the results were similar for both falciparum combination and Vivex combination. And the difference between falciparum and Vivex was this result where there will be significant decrease in length of season for Vivex combination, which is changing from endemic to seasonal. And they will occur in southwestern part of the country in the Tarai. And finally, we compared these results with the government designated risk areas. So again, emerging suitability, you'll find these colors in the first 2 maps, increase in length of season in the 3rd and 4th map, and DOHS risk districts of 2010. So government stratified the country into 4 categories, high risk, moderate risk, low risk, and no risk, in order to prioritize the vector control interventions in the high risk and moderate risk areas. So in 2010, the districts were stratified, or the stratification was done at the district level. And since 2016, the stratification is being done at the wards level. So here we have compared the districts 2010 categories and the recent 2021 ward level stratification. So these polygons, the colored polygons, are risk districts. In the south, there are high risk, moderate risk, and as we move towards the north, there will be low risk and no risk. And finally, this risk wards 2021, the red color is high risk and the green color is moderate risk. You can find them, if you can see my cursor, so it's in the southwestern part of the country, the red color is in the border and this green color in the some districts down here. And another area is over here in the mountains where there are both red and green wards. So what this map is telling us is, so the impact of climate change with malaria transmission will be emergence of suitability, right, and increase in length of season. And if we compare them with where currently the vector control interventions are being implemented, we find that most of these new places where malaria risk is going to change, they are mostly outside of the places of intervention. So these may impact the malaria elimination goal of the country right now, and may also result in resurgence after elimination. Future work, this method could be also utilized in other geographical locations in predicting the impact of climate change in malaria, as well as we can use this for other diseases like dengue. And this method not only predict, but we can also compare the result with current vector control interventions so that we can see like where is the mismatch happening or where we need to implement the vector control interventions in the coming days. So that's all from my side. Thank you so much for listening, and I will take any questions if you have.
Thank you very much. Oh, we've just got a question popped up in the Q&A. Oh, coming thick and fast. Okay, can you see the Q&A?
I think I was very fast.
The first question from Hans Overgaard. How do you explain the reduction in malaria in Nepal during the last decades with climate changes and increased temperature during the same period? How will this affect the future trends in Nepal?
Sorry, what was the question?
Can you see it in the Q&A?
I think I cannot see the question.
So how do you explain the reduction of malaria during the last decades with climate change and increased temperatures during that period?
So I think it is basically the interventions which are going on. So government is prioritizing doing the stratification and prioritizing those areas for intervention. So maybe we're yet to see the impacts of climate change. Yeah, intervention is working.
Great, thank you. And the second question from Abdullah Awash says, thank you so much. Population number is one of the malaria map factor. How can we calculate population number in crisis countries such as Yemen, where the last census was 2004, with quick population movement, and then for ITPs? Thank you. So that's asking about population change.
How to calculate population change?
Yeah.
Based on malaria prediction?
So he's saying that the census in Yemen, the last census was in 2004, so it's very out of date. But the population number would affect the malaria distribution on the map.
Right. So in this model, we have not used the population. We use the temperature of malaria transmission, the range of temperature that leads to the malaria transmission, and that we projected it into the map. So that's a good question. If we can also use population that affect like malaria distribution. But yeah, I don't know. I haven't used that, so.
Okay, thank you. And there's another question in the chat, apparently. I can't see.
I saw one question here. Would there have been changes to prediction if non-vectors of Nepal was used in the model?
Right.
So maybe, yes. So I used Anopheles stephensii here. That is not a non-malaria vector in Nepal, but that is present in Nepal according to the old reports. We use that because for this model, the temperature dependent model, we need the laboratory experimented traits of malaria transmission, like biting rate of the mosquitoes and parasite development rates. And those experimental traits data are available for Anopheles stephensii and Anopheles gambiae. But Anopheles stephensii is an Asian vector, and it is rapidly changing its range, and it's also present in India, neighboring country. However, in Nepal, the vector surveillance is very less. So maybe this vector is in Nepal. And the major non-malaria vectors of Nepal, like Fluviatilis, maculatus, these vectors, they do not have laboratory experimented data with us, so we could not use that. But maybe the result would be different, slightly.
Right, thank you for that. Just like thank you very much for giving your talk. It's really good. And hope you can get to sleep now. Thank you for joining us late.
Thank you so much.
So we're going to move to our next speaker, Professor Michael Wimberly from the University of Oklahoma. Professor Wimberly, you can start your talk.
All right. Hello. Let's see. Start the video. And we'll share the screen. All right, can you see the screen okay?
Yes, we can.
All right, let's go then. So in the interest of time, I'm going to skip the introduction and just dive right in here and give kind of a quick high-level overview of some malaria forecasting work that we've been doing with colleagues in Ethiopia, working away at this for more than a decade now. And I'm going to talk about the development of the epidemia system. That's epidemic prognosis, incorporating disease and environmental monitoring for integrated assessment. So Ethiopia is a malarious country. It's estimated that 50% of the population is potentially exposed to malaria. It's an area of unstable transmission. So historically, it's been subjected to large, unpredictable epidemics that have particularly, can cause severe disease in the non-immune adults. So what we've worked to do, given the unpredictability of this, there's always been a desire for forecasting. So we've worked on several projects, developing software tools that combine our knowledge and models in a way that they can actually be used to implement forecasting. Some objectives of this work were not reinventing the wheel, developing tools that can be integrated with existing surveillance systems for environmental data, climate and other data, using freely available satellite remote sensing data, and developing tools that are actually transferable and usable by public health institutions at regional and national levels. So kind of the conceptual framework for our work, this is a diagram from a trends in parasitology review that I did with several colleagues a couple of years ago. And if you look across the top, these are a number of the environmental variables that we can monitor with satellites. So things like precipitation, temperature, vegetation indices, water, soils, land use and land cover, human populations. And they tell us about things like the climate and habitats for mosquitoes and land cover and land use, which in turn have various influences on the mosquitoes, the parasites, and the humans, all the components of the transmission system. So we are motivated in this work by the idea that we have access to potentially a rich set of these environmental variables that can help us to understand and predict malaria outbreaks. And, again, just leaping right in, these are the major components of the epidemia system. And I would also say more generally, these are generally the steps that you need to take to do operational malaria forecasting or forecasting of any type of disease. So we start with an initial setup, number one, that involves acquisition and analysis of a lot of historical data to develop predictive models for malaria. Once we've done that, the step two is actually an implementation phase. So to actually implement the model, we need to be able to ingest new data in near real time, which is often a more challenging task than we would expect. And then using these updated data, make predictions with our models and then disseminate that information in some digestible way. And number three, anytime you get into the forecasting business, there's an interest in how accurate your models are. So in our design of epidemia, one of the things that we decided was important was to actually bake the validation into the software. So have a model validation component that will automatically run as part of the system. And I'm not going to have time to talk about it in depth tonight, but I'll be happy to follow up on that if there's anyone who's particularly interested in the validation aspect. So data is an important component of this. These are data-driven prediction models. And we worked with weekly malaria data from Ethiopia's public health emergency management system. So there is actually a very well developed, well implemented network of government clinics throughout Ethiopia. These collect data on district level, at a health facility level, then aggregated to the district level. We get counts of confirmed malaria cases by species. In our most recent project, we were working with 6 years of data across the whole country from 2014 through 2019. There are a lot of challenges in working with these data, the need to harmonize with other data sources, and anyone who's worked with health facility data understands there are challenges with missing data, suspect values, the need to do either data screening or imputation. And we worked on all of that. On the environmental data side, we used, as I mentioned before, data that were collected by Earth observing satellites and processed in the cloud using Google Earth Engine. One of the challenges working with many places around the world is that there isn't the knowledge and the computer power and the time for people to download large satellite data sets and process them and clean them and get them ready to work with. So one of the things we did was develop this cloud-based system that allows someone in a public health office who wants recent weather data to go online, use a straightforward menu-driven interface, and then download district level summaries that have automatically been processed in the cloud. So we're crunching terabytes of data in the cloud, but in terms of what people need to download to work with, it's these, much more compact summary data tables. So this was some important enabling technology that we developed. This is kind of an overview of another schematic of how the system runs. So just giving kind of a visual sense of how it's possible to actually use this software to do a weekly forecast in a regional or national public health office. Again, we assume we're not trying to recreate surveillance databases. So, we're assuming that an epidemiologist will be able to pull the latest surveillance data out of their whatever database they're working with. They go to the Google Earth Engine app that I just discussed, log in, fire it up, enter some menu items, download the environmental data, get these into particular folders on their computer system. And then all of the modeling and processing is implemented in R, which is a free and open source statistical data science modeling environment. So essentially there's one script that needs to be run. It does all of the data harmonization, processing, and modeling. And then it automatically generates fairly extensive reports with risk maps and time series figures and various types of charts that we developed in collaboration with our public health partners. Just a couple of notes here. We actually do two kinds of prediction in epidemia. And they're based on two different types of underlying models. So one is early detection. So if you look at these graphs, in both cases, this dashed vertical line would be the current time. To the left of it is historical, to the right is the future. So early detection involves tracking the weekly time series of malaria cases and seeing when that case number exceeds a threshold of the normal expectation for a particular time of the year. So here the challenge is actually modeling this threshold and figuring out how high of a deviation of these cases do we see, do we need to see before we think that we may be seeing the start of an epidemic. On the other hand, if you look at the right, on the right, early warning is basically using the relationships between temperature, rainfall, humidity, various types of predictors to project, in our case, out to 12 months in the future based on the occurrence of various types of environmental triggers. So here we're looking further forward into the future. Doing both of these is based on the idea that weather fluctuations are one trigger of outbreaks, but they're not the only trigger of outbreaks. So we can attempt to predict those weather-driven outbreaks. But then if an outbreak occurs for another reason, we still have these outbreak detection algorithms to fall back on and hopefully still give us some warning of the outbreak. And again, just a couple of examples here of some of the outputs. In addition to all of the underlying technical aspects of the data processing and the modeling, it's essential to actually take the output and translate it into something that a public health decision maker can work with. So we've put a lot of work into figuring out how to implement risk maps, highlighting different levels of early detection and early warning alerts, which I just described, and then being able to zoom in to different districts and look at time series maps here. And I don't feel I have time to go into all the details, but we've got falciparum and vivax here, both historical projected into the future. We have, rainfall, land surface temperature, vegetation indices, the environmental variables, one of the things that our partners in Ethiopia told us was that they really want to see more than just, an outbreak alert, a light going on. They want to be, they're, very knowledgeable, they're very sophisticated, and they want to be able to look at the details of the data, and study it to gain more understanding for themselves of how these outbreaks are emerging in relationship to various sorts of meteorological anomalies. And, wrapping up, another thing that we did that I'll point out a couple of years ago is we worked on a USAID project, building on some of the software development to develop a strategy for scaling malaria early warning up to a national level. So if we want to go from a research and pilot project to actually using it, what do we need to do? We did this in the middle of the pandemic, which was quite interesting. It was all virtual, but we talked to a lot of stakeholder groups in Ethiopia, and you can visit the link and look at it. Some interesting things that we identified were actually different types of predictions that were needed at different levels in the health system. So like forecasting malaria is not necessarily, a single monolithic objective. There are different types of forecasts that different people need. And, another important thing was emphasizing the need to build capacity in data science, in Ethiopia, actually in the country, to support sustainable implementation. So, just wrapping up really quickly, there are a lot of places we can go with this, extending predictions across multiple scales, new data sources, improving the software, developing data science expertise in Africa to support implementation, and then potentially extending the approach to different diseases and geographic settings. And I'd be happy to, follow up with anyone who's interested in this work. And I will just point out, just a few more slides. As with many of these projects, a lot of different people from a lot of different organizations who contributed to this, and I thank them all. They've been wonderful to work with. We do have software. It's accessible on GitHub, so you can either contact me or here are the links if you want to go get the software. And then finally, we've got a number of journal articles out on this, so you're free, feel free to follow up on any of these. And again, don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have any questions or would like to discuss any of this more. And that's it.
Thank you, Professor Wimberly. So to the participants, if you've got questions, please put them in the Q&A box, and we'll take questions for all our remaining speakers at the end in the Q&A session. So in the meanwhile, we'll move on to our next speaker, who's Dr. Kaushik Sarkar, from the Institute for Health Modelling and Climate Solutions, Malaria No More. Dr. Kaushik, would you like to start your talk?
Sure, Richard. Sharing my screen a bit. Hi, everyone. So I'll talk a little bit about a part of the entire work that we did, which is basically the fusion architecture that we used joining the long and short-term memory models with multi-head attention for early warning system. And this is globally the first fusion architecture that you see for any early warning system for any particular disease. So I'll start with the very purpose of the early warning system that we developed. And the first thing that we call is forecasting. Forecasting, as Professor Mike was talking about, has many different models. And here you can see that it is essentially predicting the number of cases of a disease. And it uses historical disease data to anticipate the future cases, aiding in resource allocation and medical preparedness. So that was one purpose. The second purpose is essentially classification. And classification delineates the potential outbreak zones based on set thresholds. So as dots move from gold to red here, you can see that it's basically the areas are having different types of burden which needs action, and this therefore directs local resources and frontline readiness to act at the last mile. And finally, we have this clustering part where it's a nuanced classification mechanism which helps in identifying zones with heightened risk, enabling targeted interventions and trainings at the last mile. And all of these, as Richard was talking about, are becoming all the more important during the time of climate change because of the change in rainfall pattern, the extreme weather events which are causing the increment in transmission seasons, which are causing more frequent outbreaks, and which are also causing extreme weather situation affecting healthcare access at the last mile. So let's look into the modeling part. Crafting an early warning system is challenging due to the multifaceted nature of real-world data. So if you could remember, since childhood, our first encounter with computation is addition. That means linearity, predisposing us to perceive even complex multifarious data through linear patterns. And that's why the very primitive model that we developed during our lifetime in time series is basically a moving average model, which predicts the occurrence of malaria by the fluctuation of the previous month's malaria cases. More recently, time series models like autoregressive parameters which are added in ARIMA or SARIMA models have been taken care of, which on top of these moving average model, which takes care of the past fluctuation, also look into the previous month's burden of malaria. But both of these types of models essentially don't work in many real-world settings. I'll give you one example of each. So the moving average model fails in scenarios like unexpected drought or changes in rainfall, unexpected monsoon. And an autoregressive model fails in scenarios like unexpected surge in migration in a particular area, which becomes more frequent during geopolitical conflict or a disaster situation. So a model for scenarios like this, where that demands a grasp of non-linearity, retention of past events, and integration of external factors, we turn to artificial intelligence. And this model that we are using here is a long and short-term memory model. This model, beyond its foundational equations, incorporates the sigma activation function that you see right here if you're following my screen. And this activation function determines the non-linearity through various gates and cell states or other different states. So let's see what those gates and states are. So think LSTM as a long-term memory, which has different gates. And think these gates as little checks or doors that control the flow of information. They decide what information should be kept and what should be thrown away. Now think of this as the cell state as the long-term memory of LSTM. So this is the cell state that lies there. It's the long-term memory. It's like a conveyor belt that carries information that the LSTM might need later. And the gates can add or remove any information from the belt. So what this forget gate does, it essentially removes any information that should be given less importance. So for example, for malaria forecasting, if last year's heavy rainfall has actually not caused a malaria outbreak, this particular forget gate will tell the model to not take that, but rather consider this year's heavy rainfall and malaria and take that into account compared to the last year and giving more weightage to that. And once that is done, the output gate then passes the information to a hidden state. And this hidden state is the short-term memory that produces the prediction part of this. So in real world, this model, as we run it, we run it on top of this particular data set where you can see all the different factors. We classify or categorize these data like previous malaria data. We have weather metrics we are using, soil and vegetation metrics, geographical information, population and health metrics, and time information. And of course, this requires a lot of data engineering before this data can actually be passed on to a sophisticated model like this. And once you run this, then you are ready to pass this model to this LSTM architecture. Here you can see the architecture, a bit of that, not the multi-head attention part, and also use Bayesian optimizers to optimize this particular model. We do benchmarking of the model through using this tape where we compare these models with a baseline model and also with the other different models that you just saw. And then we use feature analysis to identify which features are really important, because features are not, from a single model, can not be important. And then we are using clustering using Tisney and K-means clustering. So here is the training part of the model. Now, for better understanding, consider LSTM like a wise elder who understands the complex patterns from the past. And multi-head attentions acts like advisor to that elder and pays attention to every crucial detail. So attention mechanism, as you can see here in these different patterns. So attention mechanism looks into very minute details of the data or different types of sequences which needs to be focused, and then informs our LSTM model that what needs to be focused during the training part, and then that provides the necessary output. And this entirely is optimized through a Bayesian optimizer. So here is this screenshot video of the optimization running on the left, where you can see that these neural networks that are being formed, the number of neurons to the number of the percentage of dropouts that are there. So everything are optimized using this Bayesian optimizer mechanism. And now I'll show you the state-of-art techniques that we are using and for benchmarking and all. So you already saw the predictions from moving average and the ARIMA or SRWG model. Now we'll see the prediction from LSTM without the fusion architecture, which you see right now. And then once we add the fusion architecture, look at this prediction. This is fabulous simply because this particular part, 2020 to 2021, is the validation part of the model. And see, this prediction is incredibly accurate. It's practically the most accurate model that we have seen after testing more than 12 different models for this purposes. And the state-of-art, things that we have already used within our model is, first of all, area-based loopovers. We used mixed flow training for better GPU or faster GPU training. We use live plot callbacks for real-time monitoring of our models, and we also use deep shape analysis for feature analysis within the models. Now, for running this entire architecture, you of course need a lot of tools, and we also produce or develop those tools. And we created a human-centered design approach to allow each of the level of the health workers to or health cadre to contribute this. And we function as an engine room within that ecosystem. Now, these are the front ends. As you can see, these front ends are incredibly simplified because the end users need to be hand-holded for these types of front ends. I haven't spent time much, but if you need to see the video later, I can send you those videos. And this is the final part, which is the country distribution model of this entire ecosystem. So we consider this ecosystem as a river basin, which we call Glacier Delta River Basin model, where you see the different types of public health facilities, the health directorates or the ministries of health, from where the different, both types of data sources are there, health and non-health. And as an engine room, we provide the necessary technical support to all of these different categories. And we are providing the technical and technological support under the system, data integrated intelligent system for health adaptation. We have now transferred this entire technology from India's Odisha state, where we initially developed the prototype, to Indonesia. So here is a sneak peek from our partner, Mohammed bin Zayed University of Artificial Intelligence, who are right now taking this entire visualization to the next level using Unreal Engine 5, which is a gaming engine, providing a complete new simulation of this system, which we'll unveil during COP28 this year. And with that, a loud shout out to my colleague, Mr. Rishabh Dev, who worked hand in hand with me, developing this entire architecture. And of course, the government partners, India Meteorological Department in particular, of the Government of India and the Government of Indonesia, the Government of Odisha. If you have any questions, please feel free to connect, or you can email me or connect with me over phone. Thank you. Over Richard.
Thank you very much, Kaushik. And yes, please put any questions in the Q&A box. We'll do questions for all the remaining speakers right at the end. So we will move to our next speaker, Professor Jiming Liu.
Hello. In the benefit of time, I'm going to just give you a very quick introduction to a AI-enabled malaria control elimination software system. Actually, we will provide a training later in November. So for more detail, you can, learn from the training session. So this is actually a collection of tools in which we have embedded a number of technologies. Foremost is in this collection of tools, we provide a IT infrastructure, which what I mean is we provide the whole pipeline from collecting the cases, the different sources of data from the remote sensing data to socioeconomic data, all the way to the prediction of risk, which is actually not only providing a sort of a risk forecast for different regions, but actually we actually provide a granular representation of the risk at different levels over time. So this is actually, it's very useful for early warning. But also beyond that, because we are dealing with some malaria elimination scenarios in which actually the regions are actually involves many, not just districts, but also villages, which are actually widespread in the countryside. So in such case, the optimally allocate human resources is the key, which means that we want to identify where the cases are most likely to happen in the coming weeks or months, and then we can actually plan our resources for surveillance accordingly. So this is another technology will allow us to identify the sentinel site, which actually is most crucial for us to predict the rest of region. Without going there, but by looking at a certain key point, then it will actually inform us the global situation, the holistic situation. And also, because this tools, as I said, allow us to connect the whole pipeline from the data collection to all the way to the decision support. So we actually also provide a collection of the mobile phone apps, which allow us to distribute to the health workers in the front line. They can actually report some local cases. So this is actually just a quick snapshot of the different tools that has been included in this toolbox. So also another very important element is the visualization. Now this is not just a conventional GIS geographic information system. Actually, this allows us to provide a sort of a ranked risk over time. So basically, this enables us to do some kind of forecast, for example, over time, given the historical cases, if we want to say, to tell what will happen in the coming year or coming seasons, so this will show actually the predictions on the map over different regions. In this case, we actually demonstrate a cross-border region between Myanmar and Yunnan province in China. As we know, in the malaria elimination stage, many countries or many regions dealing with this kind of cross-border human mobility issues, where the imported cases is the most crucial factor to work with. So this actually allows us to forecast the cases due to the imported human migrations. So another factor is now this actually demonstrates in between the different regions how the mobility will contribute to the cases. Therefore, we can actually make a ranking of the risk. For example, if we have limited resources and we want to know what would be the top say top 3 locations or villages, for example, the health worker should go there to do a surveillance. This actually allows us to pinpoint the specific regions, for example, for the coming week or months. So this actually is something we have been used in the malaria elimination in the Myanmar-China border regions. So at the moment, we are actually also deploy this or sharing this technology with other countries, for example, Cambodia. We have run several international workshops to share this software tools. Essentially, what they can do is they can actually identify some of the issues, as I just talked about, due to the cross-border activities and so on. So the activity has been supported by WHO, HPA, and also China CDC. So we have worked with countries like, as I mentioned, Cambodia, Sri Lanka, and Thailand, and so on. So this is the training session we have been running. So essentially, the participants, they are coming from policy making all the way to frontline workers. They bring in their own cases, their scenarios. Then we can actually work together to identify how they can deploy this kind of the risk assessment and also sentinel selection tools. So that's basically, as we also, we're doing the malaria risk assessment, elimination. We also have to consider some other disease at the same time. So this is some of the applications we have been working with. So with that, I will stop here. Thank you very much. So welcome to attend to our training session in November. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Liu. So we will take up to another 12 minutes through to the end for question and answer session. If you can type your questions in the chat, we've already got some. So I'll start, if that's okay, with Professor Wimberley. Still there? Yes, good. So first question was about your application. It says, do we need to install the application? Could it be used in Indonesia? And if yes, what is the requirement?
Yes, I mean, in principle, it could be used anywhere. It was certainly developed with, our Ethiopian data in mind, but it could be like a lot of these things. I'm not sure you could necessarily just like take it out of the box and start using it, but it's all open source code. So if you have some people who are familiar with R and can get it running and maybe do some tweaking and modification as necessary, there's nothing to prevent it from being extended to other areas.
Right, thank you. Dr. Sarkar, there's a question for you. How far such mathematical modeling is going to help in malaria elimination settings?
Yeah, I just answered that question, but getting into a little more detail, we developed a patient programming intervention that could run with that particular tool. And we did a Google causal impact analysis of that, and we found statistically significant reduction in malaria burden compared to the control settings when you use these type of digital health tools alongside the targeted interventions. You see, a digital tool cannot eliminate malaria. You basically have to apply the targeted interventions based on the insights of the tool to get the desired effect, which we tried, tested on ground, and that worked.
Right, thank you. Professor Liu, there's a general question. I wonder if you can take it. Just about the impact of climate change being broader than just the effect of temperature and rainfall, but perhaps, for example, the floods in Pakistan, when there's a big jump in malaria cases, so maybe the sudden climate events that also have an impact. So is that, have you thought about that? Is that included?
Sure, yeah, I'd like to make some comments on that. When I talk about the risk assessment, our model actually incorporates the vector evaluation. Essentially, we like to study, for example, how the climate, the various factors like rainfall or temperature will affect the vector life cycle, and also, of course, the populations in different regions. For example, depends on whether it's a forest or it's a different, especially in the mountainous regions where the geographical variety is high. So basically, this actually has to be incorporated into the prediction, the risk assessment. So that's the thing. Actually, I like the Dr. Sarkar's presentation a lot. He actually mentioned something which we are also working on, which is actually incorporates the spatial temporal prediction, which not only looking at the short term, but also longer term. Because when we talk about different factors, they actually come from in all kinds of scales. In terms of temporal scales, it could be monthly, or it can be in a decadal basis. So in the case of climate change, we're looking at a wider horizon. Basically, it's not just on a weekly basis. But again, short term also has a huge impact if you talk about the vectors. So basically, if you have a huge flood, then that actually plays a key point. So that's why actually we're the short term, long term of, we call it a multi-scale spatial temporal reasoning is very important in this case. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Just come back to Professor Wimberley. Another question about, can your model operate at finer spatial scales, for example, below the district level, which I think is called Kabili? The smallest administrative.
Yes, Kabili. Thank you,
Yeah.
thank you, ILA, for that. That's an excellent question. And I'm actually typing out an answer to you right now. The short answer is yes. The approach isn't limited to a particular scale. There's a longer answer that I want take up a bunch of time with, which is that, and this is one of the things that I feel like we learned when we did, went through the engagement process a couple of years ago, is that I think there are some differences in how you would actually do the implementation at different scales. There's a, so again, just one example is that, what we found is that at the national level, there is a desire to have these really long lead, 6-month plus forecasts of a bad upcoming malaria season to make some national level decisions about, purchasing of supplies. But it may not be essential to predict, exact locations at that long lead time. What we've kind of found is that as you go down to these finer and finer scales, there's obviously more need for spatial precision, but it might not be critical to necessarily, be able to predict 6 months ahead at the Cabela level. So there are some trade-offs of the different modeling needs that we would need to take account of at different scales. But I think the short answer is yes.
Great, thank you. Dr. Saka, there's a question about validation on the ground for Odisha. I see you're typing an answer. Maybe you want to say some more about that.
Yeah, so the accuracy of the model was 94% for AI-based models, unlike statistical models, as you are aware, there is a training, testing, and validation sets of data. So after developing the training set, we validated the model using the validation set. And then as I showed during my presentation, the 2020 to 2021 data, or rather so that particular set of data was the testing set of the data, where we validated with real world data, the accuracy of the predictions. And as I said, our prediction accuracy was nearly 95% with that, much more compared to SARIMA and the moving average models.
That's it, thank you. So we'll do 2 more questions before we wrap up. Professor Liu, there's another question, which is a general question, asking if anyone's used a qualitative approach interviewing local people about how they interpret signs that malaria is coming. So using local knowledge on the ground to try and predict malaria coming.
Yeah, this is a great question. That's exactly kind of things we are working on, because the data or the model itself won't be able to tell the story, especially in this case when we are talking about AI-enabled tools. There's no ground truth. Basically, whatever results, whatever forecast we have done, we have to really visit the villages in the field. This is our colleagues, our researchers have been doing based on our predictions. Then we do, as I mentioned, the top K, right? The top 3 most high-risk regions that we actually pay visit to their families and to ask those cases. Where do they come from? Actually, how this is, whether they can go to across the border or it's a local transmission. So basically, that helps us to understand better what is the reason behind the factors need to be incorporated. Earlier on, I remember there was a question talking about the population. How do you estimate the population? Actually, in this case, there are lots of what we call the proxy data. So the data actually indirectly infers something. For example, based on the local socio-economic situations, then we can actually indirectly infer what kind of activities the local villagers or the people may undertake. So that actually help us to understand better the potential, the mobility activities. So that actually, in a sense, we are integrating the quantitative and the qualitative kind of observations in this case. Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you. So final question to Professor Wimberley, and you're typing an answer, I can see. Many countries are struggling in terms of resources and expertise to replicate this type of weather-based forecasting. Is there a simplified way of having a user interface for those systems? And would an end user be able to use it without support and input from a researcher?
You know, that's an excellent question. And I'm glad it might be easier just to answer it verbally than to try to type it out. I guess, I mean, I'll just say, you know, when I started working on this more than a decade ago, that was kind of my vision, was like, hey, you know, we're smart university people in the United States. We can develop this. We're going to put it in a box. We're going to give it to end users, and they'll be able to, you know, twiddle some knobs and push some buttons and get what they need out of it. That does, I mean, you know, a few things. That comes with some added expense to be able to do that, and to, you know, it has to be maintained too. You know, even every little app on your cell phone, you know, is constantly getting updated because it, you know, everything is constantly falling apart in, in today's cyber world. So we actually switched a number of years in and said, okay, we're going to develop tools that, like epidemiologists and, technological savvy professionals, can use in Ethiopia or other countries. We've started basing everything on R because it's free and open source. It's fairly widely used. I mean, it's not perfect. It has drawbacks. We've been able to go in and with like a week-long training course, set up, master's level epidemiologists in Ethiopian public health institutions so they can fire up the system and run it. And, they're able to keep it going. But, again, I would argue that the real goal, the long-term goal should not be, again, building things, putting them in a box and handing them over for other people to use. I mean, and I'm not saying that that's bad if you're doing that, but I feel like the long-term goal should be, building up, ultimately the way to maintain these things is to have data scientists in Ethiopia or wherever you're working who are ultimately going to take them over and be the ones who maintain them and update them and build the next generation of tools.
Right, and so thank you. So don't go, everyone. We have a quick poll that's going to pop up just while that's coming. I'd just like to thank all of our presenters. That was a really good set of talks. And hopefully you should see on your screen a poll so you can respond live. If you're having trouble, please put a comment in the chat and we'll try and sort it. Okay, it's working. Poll is for all participants. As I mentioned at the start, the webinar is being recorded and we will have a YouTube video of the webinar some point soon. Yeah, just waiting for the present to go up. Wait for a few more poll responses. It's time for the last few, another 10 seconds. Right, the last minute flurry. Okay. So thank you everyone for participating. It's been a fantastic webinar. I look forward to seeing you again for our next one. There'll be an announcement coming soon. Thank you.